The Russian railway system has always been one of the backbone industries of the nation. It connects massive distances across Siberia, fuels the military supply chain, and drives domestic trade. For decades, railway jobs were considered stable, even prestigious in rural areas. But as Western sanctions and the war in Ukraine drag on, that stability has shattered. The industry is now facing bankruptcy, with companies unable to pay salaries, maintain infrastructure, or even buy spare parts due to international restrictions. Thousands of trains have been grounded, and entire repair depots have closed their doors. What's driving this chaos is a perfect storm of corruption, mismanagement, and the consequences of war. The Kremlin redirected massive state funds from civilian infrastructure to the military budget. Billions of rubles meant for rail modernization were funneled into weapons production and frontline logistics. As a result, workers have been left stranded, without pay for months. Some regional railway hubs have seen protests, strikes, and silent walkouts, rare and risky actions in a country where dissent is brutally punished. But desperation is growing, and many workers no longer fear the consequences. Reports from inside Russia describe scenes of chaos. Employees at major railway factories, like those in Yekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, and Bryansk, have begun organizing quietly against management. Anonymous social media channels reveal messages from workers saying they refuse to keep serving a government that destroys its own people. Others have leaked internal documents showing the scale of debt and unpaid bills across the railway system, a clear sign that bankruptcy is looming. The Russian railway industry has always had close ties to the state. It's not just a transport network, it's a symbol of Russian might, linking the empire's farthest corners. But the system is crumbling. The lack of spare parts due to Western sanctions has forced companies to cannibalize old trains for components. Engineers warn that safety standards have collapsed. Some trains run with outdated brakes or unrepaired engines, endangering lives daily. Meanwhile, the Kremlin continues to issue propaganda claiming the industry is thriving, even as videos of abandoned carriages and decaying depots spread across the internet. For many Russian families, this crisis hits home. The railway workforce isn't concentrated in Moscow or St. Petersburg, it's spread across smaller industrial towns where jobs are scarce. These are regions that once formed the loyal heart of Putin's support base. Losing these workers means losing the political foundation of the regime. The frustration among them is palpable. Their loyalty, once based on pride and stability, has turned into anger and resentment. They see billions spent on war while their children go hungry and their salaries vanish. As anger grows, so does the fear in the Kremlin. Internal sources claim that Russia's Federal Security Service, the FSB, has started monitoring railway unions and workers' social media activity. Agents have been dispatched to intimidate those suspected of organizing protests. But this strategy may backfire. Every attempt to silence dissent only deepens the workers' resolve. They see that the government would rather threaten them than fix the economy. The crisis has also begun to affect the Russian military's logistics network. The railway system is essential for transporting troops, ammunition, and heavy equipment to the front lines in Ukraine. But with thousands of workers quitting and infrastructure crumbling, supply chains are breaking down. Military shipments face delays, damaged rails, and equipment failures. This could be one reason why Russia's offensives have slowed in several regions. The army simply can't move supplies fast enough. The financial collapse of the railway sector is even more devastating when you look at the numbers. Independent economists estimate that Russian Railways, one of the largest employers in the country, has accumulated debt exceeding $40 billion. Revenue has dropped by more than 30% in just a year. Inflation and the ruble's decline have pushed repair costs to record highs, while sanctions have cut off access to critical Western technologies like advanced signaling systems and locomotive software. Even China, one of Russia's last remaining trade partners, has reduced spare parts exports due to logistical complications. The Kremlin has tried to hide the scale of the problem. State media outlets have been instructed not to mention layoffs or protests. But social media tells a different story. Telegram channels and independent journalists have published photos of abandoned tracks, empty warehouses, and handwritten notices announcing unpaid wages. In one particularly powerful image, a group of workers in the city of Omsk held up a banner reading, We built Russia's rails, and now we can't even afford bread. That image has gone viral inside Russia, becoming a symbol of the country's economic decay. Putin faces a dilemma. If he admits the crisis, he exposes his government's failure to manage the economy. If he ignores it, he risks letting the anger spread and turn into a nationwide workers' movement. Either way, it's a dangerous situation. For the first time in years, the Kremlin is facing dissent from people who were once considered untouchable, the industrial class that kept the Soviet legacy alive. Economists warn that if the railway system collapses entirely, it could trigger a wider economic shock. Russia relies on railways for 87% of its freight transportation. That includes coal, oil, grain, and military supplies. A breakdown in this system would cripple not only domestic logistics but also export routes to China and Central Asia. It could even destabilize energy exports, one of the few sources of income still funding Putin's war machine. The social impact is equally alarming. Entire towns built around railway hubs are now sinking into poverty. Local stores are closing, schools lack funding, and hospitals are running out of supplies. The workers feel abandoned. They believed Putin's promises of economic revival, but now they see that the war in Ukraine has drained every last resource from their communities. Some reports suggest that underground labor movements are emerging. These groups are not overtly political, at least not yet. Their initial goal is survival, to demand fair wages and job security. But as conditions worsen, their frustration is evolving into political resistance. Analysts say that if this momentum continues, Russia could see its first large-scale worker rebellion in decades. The railway crisis also reveals a larger truth. Russia's war economy is unsustainable. The government has poured money into defense and propaganda while neglecting civilian infrastructure. The result is a system that can't sustain itself. Factories close, transport fails, and the people lose faith. The same pattern that destroyed the Soviet Union is now repeating under Putin's rule. Meanwhile, Western analysts are watching closely. They see the railway workers' rebellion as a potential turning point. When economic despair combines with political anger, change becomes inevitable. Sanctions alone can weaken a regime, but internal collapse is what brings it down. And the growing unrest among Russia's workers might be the beginning of that process. Putin's image as a strong, untouchable leader is being tested. His propaganda machine can't hide the truth forever. As the railway workers' stories spread online, Russians are beginning to question the narrative of national strength and unity. Instead, they see a country falling apart from within. The government has announced emergency measures, promising to inject funds into the railway sector and provide financial aid. But most experts believe it's too late. The funds are insufficient, corruption will swallow much of it, and trust is already broken. You can repair tracks, but not loyalty. The rebellion of 700,000 workers is more than a protest, it's a sign of a nation on the edge. The people who once built Russia's infrastructure are now dismantling the myth of Putin's stability. They've seen the truth, that the regime values power more than people. And as more industries begin to collapse, from oil to manufacturing, this movement may only grow stronger. For decades, Putin's power rested on the promise of economic stability. But that promise is now crumbling. The railway crisis has revealed the fault lines in the Russian system, a system built on fear, control, and propaganda. And those fault lines are widening every day. In the end, this isn't just about trains or jobs. It's about trust. When 700,000 workers stop believing in the system that governs them, it's not just an industrial failure, it's a political earthquake. The question now is not whether Putin can fix the railways, but whether he can survive the consequences of their collapse. As more voices rise from within Russia, the world watches closely. The rebellion of the railway workers may very well be remembered as the moment when ordinary Russians finally stood up and said, enough. And that could mark the beginning of a new chapter in Russia's story, one not written by the Kremlin, but by the people who kept its engines running for generations. If you want, I can now generate 10 realistic image prompts related to this script for your YouTube vid. Do you want me to make those next?